morning all. Thank you so much for coming to listen to my talk today. I'm very honoured to be here. It really is an amazing show, so I hope you've all enjoyed it so far. So the topic I'm going to talk to you about is why retention rate is the most important metric for success in 2025. Now, I'm going to go into a little bit about why I think that, and I'm throwing some numbers at you and everything in between, but I really want you to understand what I'm talking about here is growing a successful business. So everything I talk about is from a founder's perspective, a owner's perspective, a managing director's perspective, whatever your position is. This is actually advice on how to grow your company and move it forwards. To start off with, I thought I'd just tell you a little bit about me, just to kind of give you an understanding of why I'm here talking at you for half an hour, basically. So there's sort of two main reasons why I've been picked up to talk about this topic. So the first is I am an entrepreneur. I have been for 12 years. My first business I started when I was 22. It was a digital marketing agency. I grew that to a global size and sold that at the age of 29. At its height, I had over 80 employees working with brands such as Aston Martin, Omega, Bloomingdale's, Jimmy Choo, and everything like that. I sold that in 2021. I had a 2-year earnout, and I then launched my new venture, Gaia, which is in the green tech space, and we're fast becoming one of the fastest growing green tech companies here in the UK. That's angle one, and the reason why I flagged that is all of my advice, I really want this to be a practical half hour. I want you guys to go away and say, right, I'm going to try and do more of that. I'm going to try and do less of that. So all of the tips, all of the advice I give you is ultimately geared towards I have been there, I have done it, I have made every single mistake. Every mistake I flag here, I promise you I've done a dozen times over, if not way worse ones. So I really want you to understand that practical element. The second bit is I have quite a unique angle on this subject because I have a content and social channels. They've grown over the last 18 months. They're over 1.5 million followers, essentially based in the management, business, workplace sector. I've had over 200,000 people share their stories with me in regards to what they like about their manager, why they're thinking about moving, why they would stay, what they think is a good boss, what they think is a terrible boss. And I've tried to collate all of that into really practical thoughts that you guys can go away and apply to all of your business. So why did I pick retention as the subject for today? So as a business owner, there's sort of three main numbers we all think about, right? We have our turnover and our revenue at the top line. That makes sense. How much money is the business making? An essential figure. The second number we all care about is our operating costs. How much does it cost to keep the business's lights on? How much does it cost a month to pay the staff? How much is outgoing every month? And then the final metric we all talk about is cash flow, right? Do we have enough in the bank? Do we have that security? Do we have 3 to 6 months cash flow? One of the earliest mistakes I made in my career is how easy it is to have a profitable business and still somehow have no money in the bank because you've not gone top of your invoices, you're not managing your cash flow. So those are the kind of 3 core figures that we all care about. But for me, those numbers don't tell me much about why a company is doing well or if it's likely to continue to do well. It gives you a snapshot for sure. It tells you a lot about the past. But when you look at the next 2, 3, 4 years with a company, it doesn't tell me a huge amount. And for me, the one figure that always tells me whether a company is doing well is retention figure, because it is tied to so many different metrics within a company. How productive is your team? How motivated is your team? How up for it is it? How well are things going? Are people happy? All of these figures massively influence your top line. I'm going to share some numbers with you now, which I find genuinely astonishing, and I think is one of the biggest opportunities for a business owner, for a founder, that you will ever see. If anyone's ever breathed near LinkedIn, you will find these quotes. And the problem I have with LinkedIn sometimes, and I'm speaking to someone who's very active on it, is it kind of ruins good quotes. But we've seen these all right, okay? The CFO asks the CEO, what happens if we invest in developing our people and then they leave us? What happens if we don't and they stay? Train people well enough so they leave, treat them well enough so that they don't want to. These are talking about retention rates, but people fundamentally misunderstand what they actually mean when they're talking about that and how you can drive a business forward if you just crack these numbers right here. So I'm going to share with you some of the current engagement numbers in regards to that. I think everyone can sort of agree the news cycle is just pretty horrendous at the moment, right? And I think what I'm going to share with you is how people are genuinely feeling about work. So these numbers are applied across, these are 2024 numbers, and these are based on Europe, UK, and the US. And these are some of the numbers that we're finding at the moment. 62% of all employees say they are currently disengaged from their work. Of those 62, 54% are experiencing daily stress directly from work that's actively impacting their own health and their motivation for what they want to be doing. Under the age of 35, only 31% would describe themselves as thriving at work. And then this is the one for me, right? Only 13% say they absolutely love their job. 13%, that means 87% of people who are currently working would not say they absolutely love their job. Now, there's two ways to look at that, right? One, that's one of the most depressing stats you will ever see. Or two, as a founder and a business owner, you can say, all I have to do is motivate my team and I'm suddenly a 10% differential. That's the way to start thinking about it. Because if you can motivate your team, it changes everything. And that's what I'm here to convince you, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. So here are two more stats. I promise you I'll stop throwing stats at you in a sec, but these are important. So the first is 21%. So if someone is motivated, they are likely to give you a 21% increase in productivity in your business, 21%. Now, when we talk about productivity, I'm talking about output here. So if you talk about billing hours, that's a 21% increase. If you talk about quality of work, that's a 21% increase. If you talk about any sort of revenue generating, that's 21% increase. And when you think about that, that's kind of what, when you think about how expensive staff are, that basically means for every 5 team members you have, if you motivate them, you get a free 6th one. Which is kind of wild when you actually think about it. And bear in mind, think about the differential. 87% of people aren't in that boat. That gives you a massive recruitment pool to suddenly start tapping into. But this next stat is the one that I really love. 43%, that's the increase in productivity if the whole company is motivated. So individually, they'll give you 21%, but if the whole company is motivated, you get a 43% output increase from a business. That's absolutely wild. That means if you have a team of 20, you have an extra 8 free employees there, right off the bat. If you're 40, it's 16. It's absolutely incredible numbers, and there's a huge opportunity that a lot of brands just aren't recognizing. Because if I asked a big, I talk to these companies a lot, right? I'm very fortunate, I get invited to a lot of different talks, and I often ask, how much would you think a company would spend to get a 21% increase in sales, in marketing, in sales, in ad spend? How much do you think they would spend? An absolute fortune. I'm saying, all you have to do is motivate your team, and you're pretty much half that way already. It's absolutely crazy, and these are the numbers that people are just missing because they don't prioritize their team. And so when going back to those quotes, when I talk about people sort of go, oh yeah, that's a great sounding quote, and I'm going to post it on LinkedIn, look how amazing I am. You're not walking the walk. You really need to actually fundamentally understand how it is. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to share with you where I see the common mistakes, because no one sets out to be a dickhead boss, right? No one sits there and goes, right, my goal today is going to make people as unmotivated as possible. That just doesn't happen. But it's amazing how common the mistakes are from all the stories that I shared, how easy it is to hack people off from things you probably don't even realize you're doing. And then I'm also going to share with you what I think are the best tips in regards to how you can increase it. And then if I have time, I'll take some questions, but I often run over, so I apologize in advance. So, just going to touch into this before we get into the meat of it all, just to kind of recognize if you just have low retention straight out, just looking at that, and by retention, by the way, I'm talking about people who leave the business who you don't want to leave. I don't include people who you've removed from the business. I talk about people who actually leave who perhaps you don't want to, or who leave who you do want to, but they've resigned rather than you fired them. That's what I mean by retention, and it's a score out of 100. And I'll tell you what I think the good one is at the end. But costs. Recruitment is expensive, right? Recruitment fees, but also the time that goes into it. And actually, it's amazing when someone leaves, how often you have to hire someone at a higher salary, perhaps because you didn't quite realize how useful they were, and things like that. So there's a huge amount of cost. But the other cost you always think about is if you lose your best person, you're going to be doing less good work for your clients. You're going to be doing less best service. You start to lose clients and revenue that way. So you start to have a real detraction when it comes to cost for low retention rate. Second is time. We've all been there, right? Suddenly someone quits and you're spending your whole life reviewing CVs, doing interviews, and they're an essential part, and I'm not one to take you out there. But you want to be doing interviews and recruitment because you're growing and you're hiring more people rather than replacing people who you would have loved to have stayed, but unfortunately they left because you dropped the ball in regard to how they're being managed. So the amount of time that goes into it is enormous. And then the big one. If people start leaving your team, heads drop, morale drops, productivity drops, and productivity is directly linked to your revenue. Every single business revenue comes from productivity, whether that's a service-based, time, product, whatever it might be. It's all geared towards that. And if you start damaging that, you start to get into trouble very, very quickly. So, I'm just going to keep an eye on time, by the way, so I need to keep this up. What are the most common mistakes that I see founders, managers? Because I really do mean this, right? Like I said, no one wakes up. You have to be a sociopath to wake up and go, right, I'm here to make my team miserable. No boss thinks an unmotivated team is better. No boss sits there and goes, do you know what? I'd love a motivated team, but actually I prefer them really downtrodden, de-incentivized and ready. No one thinks that. Everyone wants to have a motivated team. And so it's amazing, considering that everyone starts saying we want this, and only 13% seem to be achieving that. It's kind of ridiculous. But here are the most common mistakes that I see founders do, managing directors do, business owners do. Too many reportees. If you are sitting in this room and you have more than 4 to 6 people directly reporting into you, you have too many. No one can do it. I'm going to talk to you about proper management here, how you properly motivate them. That is a time-consuming exercise. It's a very good thing to be doing, but it's a time-intensive. If you have too many reportees, I promise you, you will not do this. I know this person. The best manager I ever had was the managing director of my first business, and for some reason, we worked out that the team was slightly de-incentivized. We worked out she had 8 reportees. We dropped the ball. 2 more reports into her, and she was the best manager I've ever met, right? She was absolutely phenomenal, and she couldn't do it. She couldn't do 8. It's not possible. 4 to 6 is your absolute max, and 6, you have to be exceptionally well organized to do 6. So if you have more than 4 to 6 people reporting into you at this moment, you have to change that straight away. If there's anyone in your business with more than that, you have to say that straight away, whether that's introducing a new senior management layer, a middle management layer, giving someone like mentor, the more junior members, whatever it might be, you need to fix that, and you need to make sure that happens. No management training. Honestly, there's no other part of the business where people just get tossed a ball and expect to run with it and just expect to know what to do. But this happens all the time. Like, you never get sent into client sites without some training. You never get thrown a sales call without some rough, and like nothing happens. But management training is just neglected. And the reason is because you often promote from within, right? Which is great. I love that. But because someone's been around for a few years, people just sort of assume they know what they're doing. So you can have someone who's very good at the work, they do 2-3 years, you think they're a fantastic candidate, we're going to promote them to manager, and then you assume they'll carry on being fantastic. But if you've never actually spoken to them and said, this is how you manage, this is how you do a one-on-one, this is the things we require from you, these are the questions you should be asking, how are they meant to know that? It's wild. Like how, and I'm talking big companies here, do not spend a single penny on management training, but will throw money at the daftest things you'll ever see. It's such a core part because nothing ruins a business quicker. One of the leading reasons why people leave is directly their boss. Over 67% of people who quit a job is directly because of the person they report into. And so the easiest way to reduce retention rate is to make sure your manager knows what they're doing. And I'm not talking like, dozens of hours of personal one-on-one coaching, just some basic stuff, whatever it might be, you should be able to doing it, and it's incredibly easy. Thinking people will motivate themselves. I don't get this one. Founders, entrepreneurs, what I love about them is they love to take responsibility for themselves. They say, I know it's my business. If we don't do well, it's on me. If client doesn't like us, it's on me. If our product's not good enough, it's on me. And yet the second it comes to team motivation, it's, why are they so annoyed? Why are they not working hard? Don't they care? And it's like, no, of course they don't. They've just joined your business. This idea that they should come default motivated is just ridiculous. I mean, when they join a company, sure, there's a sort of, this is quite exciting, it's a new job, I hope I have fun, I hope I enjoy it, I hope it's good for my career. But this idea that they're just going to motivate themselves is idiotic. It really, really is. Like, why would they? They don't know the vision, they don't know what you're trying to do, they don't know why you're doing it, they don't know what's going on. So this idea that people just sort of sit there going, they're all so annoyed. It's like, well, if they're all annoyed, it might be a you problem. You can't, if you've got 10 people who are working for you and 9 of them are not motivated, how is that their 9 fault? It's obviously your fault. So the lack of responsibility around thinking that your core job as a founder is revenue generation and motivating your team and providing that vision. And if you're not doing that, if you're not carving out enough time to get people to access that, to understand what they're doing, you're really failing as a business leader. Not removing toxic people from the business. Now, if you have someone who's terrible at the job, everyone hates, always late, pain in the arse, losing clients hand over fist, it's a very easy decision to remove them or fire them from the business. The challenge you have, and this is the big one, is what if they're good at the job and they're still hacking everyone off within the business? That's the conundrum. If they're good at the job but that, you have to remove these people. You have to talk to them first. I'm not saying you do it straight away. You've got to give them a chance to sort of turn it around. But you can't keep them in the business, especially if they're senior, because they're having a direct impact on the people they report into. And as you grow as a business, there's one single person who becomes less and less important because the business grows, right? So proportionally, they're less of the company. But their impact, especially if they're senior, is absolutely enormous. You have to remove these toxic people from the business. It just doesn't work otherwise. And it's a real failure that a lot of people often sort of miss the mark on. Not asking the team what they want. This one's ridiculous. Honestly, the amount of sort of boardrooms I sit in, and there's strategists, and there's consultants, and they've got AI tech, and they've got, these weird platforms, and like they all serve a purpose, right? But just ask your team what you want. Hi, I'm your new manager. Tell me, how do you like to be managed? What can I do for you? What are you worried about? How can I sort of create an environment where you work? How do you work best? Like, what do you need from me? Do you like hands-on management? Do you like hands-off? Do you like regular check-ins? Like, ask them what they want. People know there's this fundamentally weird thing going on at the moment where people mistrust things they like. And I see this all the time. Work from home is a great example, or flexible working. People like it so much, companies and business leaders start to get quite suspicious of it. They sort of go, hang on, people like this a little bit too much. Something's going on here. I'm not completely convinced. If someone likes it so much, it must be quite bad for me. There's sort of like a default assumption. You go, no, this is crazy. Do you like this? Does this support you? And then you can track it, right? You can always track output and work out if they're doing the work. But this idea that people just sort of sit around guessing what their team want rather than creating a safe space where they can ask and say, look, safe space, what am I doing wrong? What can I do better for you? And as long as you've got that relationship and you spend some time developing that relationship, people will give you that. You might not agree. And this is the thing, often people are upset about stuff they've misunderstood or they've not realized why you're doing something, and an honest conversation can clear up a lot about that. But this idea that we sort of sit around and no one has any idea what they're doing, and so we'll just wildly guess and then throw things out there is just baffling. It just doesn't make sense. There's so much data and things that you can pull on. And so for me, it's an absolute no-brainer. Being a dick to people who leave. Don't do this. Don't do this. Honestly, this is the only time I'll quote the Bible, but know thyself, okay? If you're one of these founders, you do know you're one of these founders, right? It's one of the worst things you can do. Stop taking a professional decision and making it personal. Because one, it's not fair. You just don't be that person. But two, it's one of the best recruiting tools you have is people who leave your business happy. Because they've gone on. Because they go, right, I've heard this. There's so many good reasons why someone might leave, right? They could have got an insane opportunity. They might want to go traveling. They might want to do something completely else, whatever it might be. But within their network, there'll be a lot of people, and a lot of people will reference internally now about businesses as well. And if they see someone work it, they might message you, go say, hey, I've been interviewed this company. Did you like it? Had an amazing 3 years there, trained it up, had an amazing time. I'm now doing this, but what a great time. 100% recommend. Do you want me to introduce you? It's that, or do not touch this with a barge pole, because it's amazing. Even if you've had a great 3 years, if you're an awful individual for that final few weeks, I promise you they will remember it. It makes zero sense to do this. And I really do mean this, right? You know if you're one of these people. So you have to train yourself to be better than this. If you are one of those, and look, founders are quite passionate. That's one of the reasons why people want to join their companies. I get it. It serves a purpose. But the downside to a lot of founders is they take this really poorly, and it's just idiotic. Stop it now. Train yourself to have that reaction. You can go home and punch a punching bag and throw darts or whatever you want to do whatever. But in that room, in that moment, you have to train yourself to be like, totally understand. You can counter offer. You can try and motivate them. You can have a conversation about why. You can put your case forward about why you want them to stay. All of that. But you cannot be unpleasant. I had one story the other day where this woman shared a story with me. And basically what happened was she handed in her notice. She worked there for 3 years. She got a promotion. There wasn't a promotion available, so she got the promotion at another company. Amazing. Very legitimate reason to leave a company. And the boss ended up throwing a leaving party, not for her. She was uninvited. She was still at the company. She was uninvited. It was a leaving party to celebrate the fact that she had betrayed them and was no longer part of the company. It's just this is just silly behavior, right? That's unacceptable from a moral perspective. But two, word will get around. You'll start to lose the ability to recruit because you're being awful. And it's costing you in those final 2 weeks, you being a pain in the ass. Honestly, it's one of my biggest pet peeves. Just stop it. And if you're in the room, I promise you know if you do this, just stop it right now. Has anyone seen this? This, for me, is one of the cleverest things any company has done for retention ever. So this is called the Revolut Mafia. And the idea behind it is Revolut, loads of people joined Revolut, worked there for 2-3 years, and then left to start their own businesses, right? And there's an insane amount of successful startups have come out from Revolut. Now, Revolut could have done two things. They could have stood there and gone, oh, we trained them up, and now they just come up with their own idea, and they've gone off, and we invested all this time and all that stuff. But they didn't. They said, look, celebrate it. Look how many successful businesses have come off if you work for Revolut. And they said, so a lot of these people, they've worked for Revolut for 2-3 years, and now look how insane it is. And they've raised 67 startups, raising over $451 million. That's a hell of a pitch to an ambitious young person who started in the workplace, or even someone who's looking for a bit of a change. You come here, we're so good that within 3 years you can be starting your own business, is a hell of a sales pitch to getting up recruitment. So stuff like that's clever, and we need to encourage a little bit more of it. The carrot will always beat the stick when it comes to management every single time. No business has ever been run successfully by someone who just lost their shit every time something slight didn't go their way. It's just not okay. So how can we actually increase retention? So here are a few things, right, that I just think you just need to start baking in. And the first one is just around time and investing in your time into this and recognizing how important it is. So the one-on-one. Hands up if you have a regular catch-up with your team. Okay. How often, hands up if you do it once every 2 weeks or more regularly. Okay, not bad. And now, tell me if this sounds familiar. How often does your one-on-one turn into a status catch-up? So and what I mean by that is, how's that client doing? How's that work doing? Are we ready for the pitch on Friday? Have we been focusing on that? That's the big mistake. Status meetings are great, right? How are you doing? Let's check in on the work. Can I help with it all? That's all great. But the amount of time people cannibalize the one-on-one to just talk about current workload and current clients is just frustrating. There's 3 things you want to be doing on a one-on-one. First, you need to tell them what they're doing well, because they might not know. They might be doing stuff that's really great that you really admire, but if they don't know that, you need to reinforce that behavior. So tell them, I love what you're doing here, be specific. The second is constructive feedback. If you are not giving people constructive feedback, you are fundamentally failing into your job as a manager. No one is perfect, so by definition, if you're not giving things for people to work on, you are absolutely failing, and you're just letting yourself down as well, because as a business, I promise you, there'll be stuff that people do that annoy you because that's just how life works, right? But if you're not telling them, and if you're not telling them in the right way, again, shouting is not feedback, let's be very clear. I'm talking about a one-on-one where you can say, look, here are the 2 things I think you're doing really well. However, in the way you're writing your emails to the clients, I've noticed this track and it'd be great to work on this. Or the way you talk to a client at the moment, I think we can work on this and we'll do a call together and help it out. Like, you've got to help train them because it's so useful to you if they're doing the right job. But if they don't know what they're doing, how could they possibly ever improve? So that's the second bit on the one-on-one. And the final thing is, are you okay? You've got to ask, there might be stuff going on in their personal life that you need to be aware of. There might be stuff going on in their professional life that you need to be aware of. They don't have to tell you everything, but you need to give them a safe space to say, look, I'm really struggling with the commute, or I'm really struggling with this, or this client's being awful and it's really draining me, or whatever it might be. There's so many possibilities, but if you're not asking them, then it's going to be a bit of an issue. Incentivizations, honestly, this one is just a no-brainer. The amount of people who say, oh, why don't they work as hard as me, is just frankly ridiculous, because they don't own equity. It's not their business. What on earth are you offering them to incentivize? It can link back to the motivational point. Like, if you're not offering them anything, they're not going to come default incentivized. There's so many great ways that you could do it that you can tie directly into it, right? Look, cash is tight. I'm not saying everyone has to start throwing out massive pay rises, but there's share options, there's EMI, there's bonus schemes tied to profit. So you could say to them, if we get over X, well, every cent over X margin of profit, I will split amongst the team, or something like that. And that gives them skin in the game. It gives them a genuine reason to motivate to work towards you. But again, they're not going to incentivize themselves. Like, people care. The modern day work, they have so many options to, I don't like the word side hustle, but I love the idea behind it. I encourage all my team to earn on the side, but they have so many more options now because of the internet, because of social media, to monetize other parts of their lives. So if you're not offering them something that directly incentivizes them and offers them sort of light at the end of the rainbow in the sense of that, they're not going to want to work for you at all. Make them feel part of something. It's great to have a job. You have your core roles, you have your core responsibilities. But if you're a small business, this is the best way to get recruitment. Feel like they're part of something, feel like they contribute to a big business. The amount of times I hear from junior people at small, medium companies say things like, I feel like I'm part of something. I feel like I'm contributing to the picture. I feel like I'm involved in making these big decisions. They love that. Of course they do. It makes them feel special. It makes them feel excited. It makes them feel like they're contributing. Don't just pigeonhole them. Don't not share numbers. Involve them in decisions. Sort of say, this is what we're thinking. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Hold some roundtables. Have a monthly session where you speak to the employees. Whatever it might be, make them feel like they're part of the journey, because that's what drives retention up and has all the ripple-on benefit that I've spoken about. Personal life versus professional. Out of all the stories I get shared with my socials, this is the one that hacks people off the most, right? And the reason it hacks people off is everyone says the right thing, and then so few people do it. It's very easy to say, we prioritize personal life, we prioritize work-life balance and all that sort of thing. And yet the second it comes to walking the walk, so many founders and so many business owners fall apart. And I promise you, the impact that has on your relationship with your employee is absolutely astronomical. Because it is a pain for you, I get it, right? If something happens in their personal life, they're required to be off work for a week. As a small business, that can be hugely impactful because you have key employees when you're a small business, and it can have massive impact. I do get it. But if you want someone to work for you for 4 or 5 years, at some point, I guarantee, in that 4 or 5 year period, something will happen in their personal life that will impact their work life. That's just a sad fact of life. And it could be a positive thing. It could be, one of the things we used to do was something called Take Two, where if you work for us for 2 years, you then get a 2-month sabbatical to go off and travel. We didn't pay you for that, but we gave you that 2 months, and then your job was safe for the end of it. And you think, well, that's a great thing. But the reason we did that was our average age was 23 at our company at that time. And everyone would work for 2 or 3 years that would train them up to be incredibly useful, and then they'd all want to go traveling, which I get, right? That's what your mid-20s are for. Like, you want to go traveling. And so for us, we thought, well, how can we... They want to do that. I love that. I'm all for that. But how do we get them back? And we say, okay, fine. You work for us for 2 years. We'll give you a 2-month unpaid, but you can go away and then your job come back. If you work for 4 years, you get 4 months. And that's how you kind of get people to sort of doing things like that. Just sort of makes a huge amount of difference. But things happen in their personal life, and if you step up and if you do what you all say you will do, which is we'll look after you, you're part of the team, all that sort of stuff, they will give you loyalty like you wouldn't believe. You suffer a 3-4 week period, they'll give you years of service. But if you fuck them on this, I promise you, you really do end up in a lot of trouble. So the final slide, 80%. This is what I consider to be a good retention rate. Now, I want to clarify, like I said at the start, I don't count people you fire. If you fire them, they don't fall under this retention rate. But I'm talking about 80% is what I think is good, because 20%, like I said, there are a lot of good reasons for people to leave a company. And sometimes you get a bit unlucky. Sometimes someone wants to go work in Singapore, or they want to go traveling, or they just want to do something completely else. That's absolutely fine. But as a business owner, firstly, I bet a lot of you don't track your retention rate, so I would really recommend you do that. And so how you do that is you take the 12-month period and you say, right, this is how many people we've got working for us, and this, you take a percentage of how many people leave at the end of the year. But you really want to focus on that. And the second is working to drive that up. Because I promise you, if you get to 80%, I've run a business where it's been at 80% and it was the most successful years we ever had. I've also had a business where it was at 40% and it was the worst 2 years of my life. It was absolutely horrendous. It helps you out so much to focus on this sort of stuff. So I've got about 4 or 5 minutes, so I just want to leave it there to just give you a chance to ask any questions you have. But thank you very much. I hope everything I made sense. So I do rant away at this sort of stuff. So I hope everything I said made sense. But yeah, if there are any questions, please do let me know. Otherwise, thank you very much. I'll just go interview.
Thank you for the talk. That's so nice. And I'm glad you're speaking up on behalf of the people who are working. But I was wondering, since you have the social media and stuff, is there any insights you had on how do you think, like on the employee perspective, how would you suggest approaching that? Whether you're in a company that's like, maybe you think they could do better, or maybe you want to look at something on the side, like what would you say?
Yeah, good questions. Sorry. Yeah, good question. So as an employee, the one-on-one is meant to be your safe space, right? That's your honest time where you can be quite honest with your boss. You've got to be diplomatic, right? You can't just go in saying, you're an arsehole, he's a dickhead, and I hate all of you. Like, you've got to be diplomatic, but you can say, look, these are the bits I love, however, these are the areas I'm struggling with. And what I always say, some people will say, oh, my boss would take that really badly. If they take that badly, you're in the wrong place anyway, if I'm being very honest. Like, that's just not good enough. And I don't mean that from I think that from a moral perspective, but I also mean if they're reacting that badly to that, they're not going to have a successful business for very long. So your one-on-one is your safe space. And if you're not having them, you can put them in the diary yourself. You can say, by the way, I put a catch up. I hope that's okay. Let me know if you can move it. You can be quite proactive on these things. You had a question?
Thank you very much. It makes a lot of sense, and I agree with everything you said.
Thank you.
I am a coach in the salon industry, and that industry is struggling a lot with retention because of the gig economy.
Because of the what?
The gig economy, basically going freelance. And the fundamental reason they're going freelance is flexibility. It's very difficult to provide flexibility in an appointment-based environment. I just wonder if you've had any experience or ideas.
Yeah, I mean, flexibility is tough. And again, it's one of the big hardships of an entrepreneur now and a founder is people have a lot of options, right? There's a lot of platforms, there's a lot of online stuff that you can actually earn, and it is hard. Honestly, that's a tough one. I think try and be as flexible as possible, but then try and incentivize them elsewhere. So, shares, go for a monetary value. Say, look, if we all do well, I promise you here, put it in writing and incentivize them from a monetary perspective. Look at the benefits package, all of that, because I appreciate that's quite tough as well. But my advice would be to tie it into performance. If the business does well, they all directly benefit from it and try and improve it that way. I think we have time for one more at the back. You're making me come over. Sorry.
Really genuinely great speaking event. I really got a lot of insights into it, and it was really good. I just wanted to genuinely ask about about employees' personal and professional life, because they obviously might be going through something. So I just wanted to ask, how can you genuinely balance that? Have them allow them some free time while also managing to give their work at the same time? How do you ensure there's a good balance of those two, so that essential work isn't being undone, while also ensuring that they can have as much free time as they can? I'm just wondering, what steps can business founders take to try and do that?
Yeah, good. Sorry, I'm going to go over here then. Yeah, good question. So when it comes to personal and professional life, I get it, right? Because a small business, nothing shafts you more than someone just who genuinely is key. And we like to think there aren't key employees, but they absolutely are, especially if we're a small company. You just have to have that chat with them. And there are options, right? Loosen the restrictions. I think the thing I struggle with, right, there's fairness and equality. And what I mean by that is sometimes people just need a bit more support. And you don't have to then give all of that. The thing I hear a lot is, if I do this for you, I have to do it for everyone. It's like, no, you don't. If someone's genuinely going through something, their employees and their colleagues are going to be okay if you give them a little bit of extra support if they go through something awful in their personal life. So I think you just have to be really upfront about it, keep the communication, but just recognize that if something is big going on in their personal life, work becomes like, it couldn't become less important, right? If we're talking about the big stuff, the illnesses, the family members, like work quite rightly couldn't become less important. I think you just have to recognize and appreciate that, give them the support, give them the space, and then trust that you have that relationship when they come back. I think I'm being looked at to time up, so I'll wrap up there. But thank you so very much. Please do reach out if you have any questions, but thank you very much.